You see, love is a way to get free, is it not? I mean, isn't love bring you the freedom of security and fulfillment and joy?
Apparently not, as we shall see.
But Françoise Sagan, the famous French writer, some years ago when she was having a magazine interview, she was, I think, kind of up in years at the time, and they asked her, have you lived the life you wanted to live? And she said, yes, I have lived to be free. And then the interviewer said, then you have had the freedom you wanted. And Sagan said, yes, well, I was obviously not free when I was in love with someone, but one's not in love all the time, fortunately.
I was obviously not free when I was in love. Tim goes on to describe how love is this suffocating condition that requires one to give up their very identity. Oh, sorry, that's in his other video, the one about what hell is really like.
Apart from that, yes, I've been free. Very realistic, and I'll tell you why.
A deep insight or some sort of credentials of acquired knowledge?
Why? The freedoms of love only come if you surrender all kinds of individual freedom.
Forget this lady already? Her point was that when she was in love was the only time she was not free.
I remember it was very shortly after I was married. I was coming home from work, and I suddenly had an idea. I don't even remember what it was, but I took a detour. I went someplace to buy something, and I got home about 25 minutes late. And my wife looked at me and said, "Where were you?" Now, you have to remember, this was before cell phones, and as some of you probably suspect, it was before phones. But the whole point was, so I should have written her a letter, I guess. But the point was, I mean, all of my life, you can make I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I'm married, and therefore, my right to make even small unilateral decisions is over forever.
Well, maybe I'm exaggerating just a little bit.
Because the more intimate a love relationship, the less independent you can be.
I like cake too, but when I eat my cake, I find I no longer have cake. You're not really describing constraints as freedoms, are you? Oh, I guess you are.
The only way to get the freedoms of love is to surrender freedom.
I wish preachers would quit pretending to be experts on relationships. Admitting you haven't got a clue is mere honesty. Love and relationships do not require any sort of surrender. Why do you assume that those we love are really our enemies? Yeah, I surrender. Are you sure you ever been in love?
All kinds of freedom, drastically. Because, first of all, we saw what? You've got to know the truth. You've got to know the truth. And to surrender your freedoms to the truth to get the reach of deeper freedom.
I'm guessing you'll say the truth is God, but you haven't any more access to the truth of God or even the existence of God than any atheist does. There's also something about surrendering freedom to get to deeper freedom, which was not really distinguishable from wanting to be in love and practicing some restraint so as not to piss her off. Constraint and restraint, being the very opposites of freedom, is something that we'll need to ignore for the rest of this film.
In every area, and a lot of you are saying, and here you're being, I understand, you're saying, look, I have done that in a couple of love relationships where I gave up my independence. I gave up my independence. I started sacrificing, but the other person didn't, and I felt dehumanized and exploited. And I'm afraid of going back into those kinds of relationships, and I'm certainly afraid of what you're trying to get me to. Yeah, I know what you're doing. You're a minister, you're a preacher, it's a church. You're trying to get me to say, you need to surrender to the truth of God. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of being exploited. I'm afraid of being used. Jesus is more liberating than you thought. There's a movie, in the movie.
If Jesus existed, and if he was God, does one bad weekend really count as payback for an eternity of subservient love? Not the love between equals as is ideal for man and woman, but the subservient love of a slave for a master. Well, don't think about it too much. Let's hear more about the robots.
Movie I, Robot, it's only a couple years old, right? The movie I, Robot, not the book, because the movie has nothing to do with the book at all. But in the movie, the main character, I think, pretty much, is Sonny, who is a robot. And Sonny the robot has been created by his maker to head off a robot rebellion. And at the end of the movie, he's already done that. So he's fulfilled his design program, but now he has nothing to do because he wasn't made to do anything past that. And he says to Detective Spooner, who's the other main character, he says, now that I have fulfilled my purpose, I don't know what to do. And Detective Spooner says, I guess you'll have to find your way like the rest of us, Sonny. That's what it means to be free.
Finding your own way is what it means to be free.
And the movie scriptwriter has perfectly enshrined the modern understanding. What it's saying is this: if there is a design program, if there is a set of divine directives from your maker that you have to comply with, you're just a robot. You're dehumanized. You're not free. You're only free if there's nothing you were made for. If there's no purpose that you have to comply with, no design purpose that you've got to submit to, then you're free, because then you can live any way you want. And of course, it's disorienting to say, oh, I'm not made for anything, I have no purpose in life, but at least you can create your own purpose, then you're free. But the gospel writer John chapter 1, verse 1, reads this: in the beginning was the Word. Now that doesn't grab you probably, it's the English what it says, but in the Greek, and the original readers read it and they were amazed, it said, in the beginning was the Logos. That's what it says in Greek. John deliberately used a absolutely loaded Greek philosophical technical term. What is the Logos? Well, the Logos, you can see the word. The Logos means it's related to our word logic or reason. But it's not talking about reason in general. It's talking about the reason for life. And the Greek philosophers were asking this question: what is our reason for life? What is our reason for existence? What were we made for? Look at the fish. It's so obvious that the fish is designed for the water. The fish is designed for the water. And when you put the fish in the water, it experiences freedom. What were we made for? So that if we give ourselves and surrender to it, we'll experience freedom.
So our purpose in life is to surrender.
And that's the best we can do. We just have the freedom of knowing that we're not made for anything. There is no design purpose that we're made for. But along comes John, and in John chapter 1, first of all, he says to the skeptics, he says, no, there is a Logos. There is an absolute truth. In the beginning was the absolute
And exactly how John would know this? Who knows?
truth. But he then says to the traditionalists, it's not an abstract absolute truth. It's not a set of divine directives that comes down from God and that I have to comply with or else be destroyed. He says there is an absolute truth, but it's not an abstract absolute truth. He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and we've beheld His glory. And John says there's an absolute truth, but it's not an abstraction, it's a person. The absolute truth has become a person, a personal absolute. An absolute person, not an absolute principle, an absolute person. And here's what you were made for. And that's the best we can do. We just have the freedom of knowing that we're not made for anything. Him. To love Him, to know Him, to serve Him, to enjoy Him.
Serving God sounds a lot like a divine directive.
And this is the bombshell in the history of philosophy when John said, we're not relativists. There is an absolute truth, but the absolute truth has become a person to know, a person to hug, a person to love. And you say, well, what's the big difference between there being an absolute truth that's an abstraction versus a person? All the difference in the world, friends, because if the absolute truth is an abstraction, it is dehumanizing, but if it's a person, it's liberating.
Non-living and fictional characters, to me, do seem like abstractions, whether you want to not call them abstractions or not.
God, the absolute truth, became a person and went to the cross. And on that cross, Jesus Christ, God, said, I will lose my independence for you. I will adjust to you. I will sacrifice for you. And guess what? He was exploited. See, Jesus comes to you and says, I already did the surrender part to the human race, and I was killed for it.
So God planned a bad weekend, and this is supposed to mean what?
My arms are open to you. I've already done the surrender.
Average burn victim suffers so much more than you did for 3 days. How exactly do you think your suffering compares in the
Now, I'm
slightest?
just asking you to surrender to me. How could you possibly ask anything more from a God than that?
How could we possibly ask for more? All powerful and the most impossible things are easy for you. Yet you don't heal the sick, you don't clothe the naked, you don't feed the hungry, and you do nothing to alleviate suffering in the world. It's almost as if you don't exist and we should give to charity and not to churches. Ah, this is the Palin-esque pivot. He became a slave, so why not pay for his bad weekend with an eternity of subservience?
How can I trust God? Here's a God who's lost his freedom for you. Philippians 2 says Jesus Christ did not hold on to his godhood, but rather his equality with God, but he emptied himself and became a slave and was obedient even unto the death of a cross. Here's a God who was the ultimate free being, and he was bound, and he was nailed, and he lost his freedom, and he opened himself, and he adjusted, and he surrendered his freedom. God surrendered his freedom so that you could know you can trust him. And this is liberation.
Someone else pays your debts, well, that is liberating. Yet not at all anything like actual justice.
Think, if God just gives us an abstract truth, a set of rules, and says, now obey it, and you will go to heaven. I'm obeying it. Why? Out of fear. I'm driven by fear. I'm a slave to fear. I better do this, I better do that, or else he's going to get me, he's going to punish me, he'll send me to hell, he won't answer my prayers. It's all out of fear. See? I'm a slave. But if, instead of God giving me an abstract truth that I have to obey in order to save myself, I have a personal truth who comes down and lives the life I should have lived and dies the death I should have died on the cross and saves me by sheer grace, that's liberating.
Oh, that's bullshit. There is probably nothing you have done that deserves crucifixion, and if you had done something that would have deserved something like that, no one can take your place on the cross.
And only if the absolute truth is a person who's done that am I liberated. If you understand the truth of the gospel, it frees you from everything. How about you? Has it freed you? Has it freed you? Do you know 2 Corinthians 5, someplace, where Paul says, the love of Christ constrains us. The only thing that constrains you in a way that doesn't feel oppressive, the only thing that moves you to do the things you should be doing is the love of Christ. The love of Christ, what he's done, the loss of freedom so we could have freedom, constrains us.
Constraint is still not freedom. Freedom is freedom. Love does have constraints, but love and freedom aren't the same thing. The argument that God became a slave, sort of, for a weekend, without any real danger to himself, so you ought to be a slave too, while you live, in this life. Even if it just turns out it was something some shepherds imagined a long time ago. Well, that doesn't really strike me as anything to strive for. You should be a slave to God, even though your service is completely meaningless. You should still consider yourself a slave, for some reason. Also, if you ever acquire any slaves, there's some good advice about not beating them too much in the Bible.